Hey gang, just giving you a quick little sort of refresher recap on how we can get our sites uploaded and then published and hosted for free on GitHub Pages. So one thing that just off the bat is a new thing that GitHub added in the last few months was a dark mode feature, which I tend to always go with dark mode for things, but you can see mine's going to look different probably than yours because I'm in dark mode here, but everything else is the same, okay? Um, so what I'm going to do is when you log into GitHub and get yourself logged in, I don't know what your logins were from before. I encourage you guys to use not your Niagara College emails because you need a confirmation email, and I'm always concerned that Niagara College's email system is going to put everything in spam and you won't get it. So I said sign up with your own thing. If you can't remember what your account was before, either try to do a password reset, or if you don't even know the email address you use, just create a new account. It's totally free and it doesn't take very long at all. But once you're logged in from anywhere that you are, on the screen in the top right corner, there should be a little plus sign here, right? There's a little, your profile icon, a little notifications bell, and a plus sign. And I'm going to click that plus sign and create a new repository, okay? So repositories are just the ways that GitHub sort of calls a folder, essentially like a file folder that you would have on your computer with your files in it. So on your computer, you might have a folder that has all of your personal site files in it. Here, we're going to create a repository in GitHub, which is going to act like that same type of folder on GitHub, right, where you're going to put those files. So instead of being on your computer, it's going to be on some other computer in some other location, which will give you the ability to actually put that up on the web. Quick thing about repository names and about naming things in general in GitHub. GitHub cares about, first of all, capitalization, okay? A file called index.html with an uppercase I is not the same as a file called index.html with a lowercase I. Your computer, whether you're on a Mac or a Windows machine, it probably doesn't care one way or another if you put uppercase or lowercase characters. And it probably also doesn't care if you put spaces in your file names, but GitHub does. So what we're going to do here is if we have to do a file name or a repository name that has a space in it, use a dash instead, right? So if I had a two-word name that I wanted to use for my repository, let's say I was doing personal site, right? I'm going to do personal dash site. And I can use anything as long as I haven't used that as a repository name before. Okay, it just needs to be unique to me and my sort of account on here. So I would always do that. If you need to put a space in there, put a dash. Same goes with file names. If you've got image files, don't have it called like, project space one. Put a dash in there or get rid of the space altogether. Okay, capitalization matters and spaces matter on GitHub. I'm just going to call mine for now just example. Okay, and what I'm going to do is keep everything else the same because I'm not too concerned with anything else here. These are other things that we can take action on, but we don't really need to. I'm just going to keep it public. I'm going to keep all of these things unchecked. I don't really care too much about this, and I'm just going to go create repository. Okay, so after I do, I'm going to get a screen that kind of looks like this. And there's a whole lot of commands to put into the terminal here. If you were doing it that way, we don't have to. That's the nice thing about GitHub is it has this easy drag and drop interface where we can just take files from our own computer and drag them into here, okay? Or like click and use the file uploader. And so that's kind of what we're going to do to get started here. So I want to get started by putting some files from my computer and uploading them to GitHub so that they're hosted there. So I'm going to go, I don't want to do this get started by creating a new file, right? I'm going to go get started by uploading an existing file because I have files that I've been working on locally on my machine. You guys have that too. So I'm going to go upload an existing file. And from here, I can either drag files right to here or choose them from my, click and get the file browser and actually choose those from here. What I'm going to do is use my Finder. Okay, and I have my project folder here. Now, one thing about this is I don't want to just drag my whole folder into here because if you look, what I've created in GitHub is a folder called whatever my folder name is, right? Example. So if I drag this example folder into here, what I'm going to end up with is essentially a folder called example on GitHub with another folder called example inside of it. That's not what I want. And that'll actually kind of mess up my URL here a little bit. What I want to do instead is I want to mimic what I have on my computer on GitHub here. So instead of dragging the whole example thing in and having a folder called example inside of another folder called example, I just want to drag the stuff that's actually in example on my computer and put that in example on GitHub. So I'm going to grab my files. I have an index.html file, I have a styles.css file, and I have an image folder here that has one image inside of it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of those three things. Okay. You might have more than this, obviously, but I'm going to grab those three things. And notice that for my images, I'm just going to grab that whole folder here. And what should happen is GitHub will recognize that it's bringing in a folder. There's one thing that's a little bit confusing is there's no way to create just like a folder inside of a repository on GitHub. We have to kind of like drag files that are embedded inside of a folder on our computer into there to create that folder. If I were to just grab my image file individually here and drag it in, GitHub's going to think I'm just pulling in an image file right into the root, which isn't what I want. So I'm going to grab everything that's inside of my folder. Okay, highlight it all, grab it, and then I'm going to click and drag and bring all of those things over. And what I should end up with is I should see the files that I want to bring. So for me, I just had an index.html. I can see that. Notice it's all lowercase, right? That's very important here to be able to find that index file and serve up the home page. My styles.css file. And then you can see here, this pulled in my image folder with a file inside of it. So it's uploading a file called gfx.jpg inside of a folder called img, which is good. This is giving me the structure I want. So with that, I can put a little note to myself. I'm just going to say this is my initial I'll just say like initial upload and commit those changes, okay? So this could take a moment, but in the end, what you should have is you should get thrown to your repository page here, okay? And here I'm at my example homepage, or you could be at, personal site or whatever you've called yours. And here I am. One thing to note is, by the way, the naming of this, I called mine example. If you call yours personal site or whatever you want to call it, if you're buying a domain name for this, and there's another video that shows how to set this up, it doesn't matter too much what you've called this. It'll just sort of be you in your GitHub repositories editing your files in there. That's kind of, you're the only person that'll really see the name of that thing. Everyone else will just get thrown to, whatever the domain name is that you bought. But that's in the other video. Okay, so I can see my stuff here. Now, right now, these files themselves are being stored in like the cloud storage of GitHub, right? So now I have my files stored on my computer and I have my files stored on GitHub, okay? If I make changes to my files on my computer, those changes aren't going to automatically happen on GitHub. These things aren't linked, right? I'm going to have to re-upload my file. So if I make a change to my index.html file, I'm going to have to drag that back in and re-upload that thing, right? Drag it back in, hit commit changes, and re-upload it. I'm just going to cancel that because I didn't make any changes right now. In order to get this to actually display as a website, there's another step here that we have to take. And what we need to do is across sort of the top inside of my repository here, I can see I have these other tabs, right? So the code tab is the default one that you'll always get thrown to. There's all these other ones, things like issues, pull requests, actions, projects, wiki, security, insights. We don't need to worry too much about these. A big part about GitHub is it's this collaborative tool to have multiple people kind of working together on coding projects. That's what most of this stuff is actually for. For us just to be putting up our own sites and hosting them, we're really going to only be concerned with the code panel here, right? The code tab, which is this one that shows our files in there, and the settings tab. And the settings tab really only at the start pretty much of a project. So what I'm going to do is go to the settings tab. If I need to change my repository name, I can rename it here. Okay, again, I'm not that concerned with it. It's all going to be fine. But I'm going to scroll down here, and what I want to find is the GitHub Pages section. Okay, and you can see there's a link here if you wanted to read more about this, okay, about GitHub Pages and what they are. But they're designed to host your personal organization or project pages from a GitHub repository. Okay, cool, great. So what we want to do is right now, the source here, okay, it says, the source that should be actually hosting or serving up as live website is set to none, which is the default, that it's not going to just host things as a website without you saying that you want it to. So GitHub Pages is currently disabled. Select a source below to enable GitHub Pages for this repository. So all that we need to do is from this little drop-down menu that says none, I'm going to select my branch, okay, or the place that I just threw in my code. You can have multiple branches in GitHub. We're not going to get into that, especially if you're just working on stuff alone and it's just your own website. But generally, you're probably only going to see none and main here, which is fine. And I'm just going to select main, okay, and I want to leave it at the root, serving up the root as that's my site that I want to serve up, okay, and then I'm going to hit save here. What that's going to do is reload my page. I can see across the top, GitHub Pages source saved, right, in this little sort of banner across the top here. If I scroll down back to that section, what you'll see is across the top now of the GitHub Pages section, you're going to see your site is ready to be published at, and then it's going to give you a URL there. If I refresh this again, now it's gone green. It says my site is published at and gives me the URL for that. So now I can actually go over and I can see, okay, here's the thing that I just published. Okay, here's my site. So that's it, that worked. Now, when you make changes to your files, like if I change my index.html file and re-upload it, one thing to remember is it can take a couple minutes for those changes to reflect. And also sometimes you might need to do like a hard refresh to actually see those changes, especially if it's your CSS that you've changed. The browser tries to kind of aggressively cache style sheets. So that may be something that you need to look at and do a Shift Command R, okay, in Chrome on a Mac to do a hard refresh, aka request all the resources from the server again, so then you'd get that up-to-date CSS document. Okay, but that's kind of it. What I like to do is grab this URL here often and copy it and throw it into my about here. I'll put like the website URL. Okay, and you can see mine looks a little bit different than yours just because yours is going to be like your username.github.io / whatever the project is. Mine looks a little bit different because of a certain way that I have a custom URL set up on my GitHub account. Like I said, check out the other video because I'll show you how to get a custom URL set up to your GitHub so that your homepage can be, your name dot whatever, and then that'll take you right to your personal site, which is hosted for free on GitHub. Okay, but that's in the other video. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So that's it for this one. And yeah, that's it.